Good evening, everybody. My name is Matt Erickson. I have the honor to conduct the Augustana Brass Choir. Thank you so much for spending this beautiful evening with us indoors. We've got a special treat prepared for you. This concert has been 3 years in the making. Dr. Rolf Olson and I discussed when I was coming back to the United States after a tour in Germany in the Air Force Band about getting Augustana Brass Choir and the Sioux Empire Brass together. And tonight is a celebration of that idea to honor one of Augustana's greats, Dr. Harold Krieger. We opened tonight with Doc Krieger's very own arrangement of Salvation is Created. Tonight we're going to pay a very special tribute to him, both in song and in words, to really detail the impact he's had on Augustana, but also on Sioux Falls and the brass playing community. You'll hear a good bit more about Doc Krieger and his impact throughout the night, but I want to kind of focus on the students here, the new Augustana students. You'll get to hear a little bit from the former Augustana students later. The next piece is from Felix Mendelssohn, his Farewell to the Forest. While Doc Krieger never performed this particular piece at his time at Augustana, I believe he would have wholeheartedly approved if the arrangement existed when he was here. It's symphonic in character, and the thoughtful arrangement of a folk tune aligns beautifully with his artistic sensibilities. The interplay between the flugelhorns and the contrast of the conical versus cylindrical brass instruments showcase a full expressive range of the brass choir, something Doc Krieger was uniquely capable of bringing out. We hope you enjoy Abschied vom Wald. We're going to make a quick stage change here. You notice brass players make good furniture movers, so if you're ever in need of moving houses, you just contact us. We're glad to move our furniture around for you. There'll be a few staging changes this evening, so please bear with us. The brass choir has had a very busy year. We meet twice a week for 50 minutes each. This year, the brass choir has performed at Vespers here at Gloria Day. We've also performed on chapel services on campus. We also had a great concert in April with the Augustana Choir at the Cathedral of St. Joseph in April. So we're delighted to share all those stages. We encourage you to keep watching our social medias as well as our calendars online to see the next time the brass choir is performing next year. Dr. Krieger was very passionate and a very loud advocate for brass ensemble music. I was reading a dissertation by Dr. Greg Handel, one of Doc's former students, and he had said that in his very first week at Augustana, he advocated for the brass choir and a student brass quintet to be added to the student calendar, or to the student catalog, to be an academic class at Augustana. That's a pretty bold move, being in your first week on the job. At Augustana, we want to honor that tradition of not only having brass choir, but having brass quintet. The Augustana Student Brass Quintet before you has also had a very busy year as well. They carry on Doc Krieger's mission of having brass chamber music present. They performed at chapel. They performed at Sunnycrest Retirement Home. They've gone on tour with the Augustana Choir. So we're very proud of them and their work. We hope that you enjoy their presentation of the first movement of the Victor Ewald Brass Quintet, number 1. We have two graduating seniors this year. You've heard from them both already, but I'm going to point them out to you. Aiden Boone, the trombone player in the brass quintet, is a senior from Omaha, Nebraska. Aiden is earning his degrees in music and music production and entrepreneurship. Aiden is going to be continuing his studies at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, where he is going to be majoring in music performance, and he'll be a graduate teaching assistant under Dr. Scott Anderson at the University of Nebraska. So we're very pleased for a bright future for young Aiden, and thank you, Aiden, for all your contributions to Augustana School of Music. And Miss Grace Lenning from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Grace, wave hi. There we are. Grace will graduate with degrees in environmental studies, Spanish, languages, literature, and culture, and minoring in entrepreneurship. Did I get them all? Is 3 majors enough, Grace? Grace is going to take a year off to recover from doing 3 majors. She intends to travel to Europe and begin her graduate studies in Spain in the fall of 2027. Grace, you've been a ever-present, awesome personality in the School of Music, participating in the Augustana Band, brass choir, and almost everything that you can. So, Grace, thank you very much for your contributions. How about a round of applause for Grace? The Augustana Brass Choir is forever grateful for Doc Krieger's, the way that he built the program for us. A little bit of information about him. Many of you know this already, but it behooves our students to hear this. Doc Krieger served as professor of music at Augustana University for 28 years, from 1965 to 1993. He was hired from St. Cloud State as assistant director of bands. He retired in 1993 with emeritus professor status. He was born in Minnesota. He was the eldest of 11 children. He studied at Lutheran College in Decorah and later earned his master's and his doctorate degree of music from the University of Northern Colorado in Greeley, Colorado. Dr. Olson, isn't that where you received your degree? You're going to see a lot of continuity here tonight. So Doc Krieger, UNC, Rolf Olson, UNC. Doc Krieger was offered faculty positions simultaneously both at Augustana and Sioux Falls and Augustana and Rock Island. He chose Augustana, and we thank God for that. He says in an interview with Dr. Greg Handel that it was partly due to the less demanding workload here at Augustana and the proximity to his wife's family in Sioux Falls. I think he made a great choice. Doc Krieger was known to contrast his stricter colleague, Leland Lillyhaug. Krieger was the much more relaxed in demeanor. He successfully advocated for the brass choir to be offered as a formal course and led the brass choir in many significant performances. Initially conservative in his programming, Krieger eventually pushed the boundaries of the modern brass choirs, using works such as Stan Kenton Library and Ralph Carmichael for Vesper services. While the students responded favorably, many of the people in attendance at Vespers did not. They sent letters to the university president or college president at the time demanding his resignation and or firing. Needless to say, that did not happen. Harry did kind of recant on his programming and decided to offer a student version of Vespers where that music was performed a little more regularly. By 1968, some highlights for the brass choir include performing for the ordination of the Bishop Paul F. Anderson at the cathedral. In 1969 and 1971, the ensemble was invited to perform at the North Central Division of the Music Educators National Conference. The brass choir undertook 5 international European tours and numerous U.S. appearances, including the New York Brass Conference performances 3 times and a performance at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. To finish his career, Doc Krieger served as chair of the music department from 1990 to 1993 when he retired. I have to extend a very special thanks to Dr. Greg Handel. I hope he's watching on live stream. Greg is the provost and assistant vice president for Northwestern Louisiana State University. He did his doctorate on the Augustana School of Music and the music department from early conception to the mid-70s. He was a great help to this, but also to kind of let Doc Krieger's legacy live on in written word. If you're ever curious about that dissertation, I urge you to reach out to myself or to Greg, and we're happy to let you read that. It's a really interesting thing. So, To wrap up our concert, I chose a hymn song. If you look at Doc Krieger's old programs, he did a lot of hymn arrangements. And this is one of the best ones. Again, I really have a strong feeling that if Doc Krieger was here, he'd approve, if not want to see the score to this one. So to close our portion of the concert before the Sioux Empire Brass kicks off, please enjoy Our God, Our Help in Ages Past.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Rolf Olson. I am the director of the Sioux Empire Brass, and normally I would not talk quite a bit before I would just play at our concerts. That if you've been to any of our concerts, we play first and then talk. But since they need a little time to get up here and get set, I'll say a few words about our first piece that we're going to play, Images for Brass by Stephen Bulla. Stephen Bulla grew up in a musical family. His father played tuba and his mother piano. He took up music too and attended the prestigious Berklee College of Music in Boston, where he studied trombone performance with Phil Wilson and composition with Herb Pomeroy. In 1980, Bulla earned a position as staff arranger for the President's own U.S. Marine Band and Chamber Orchestra in Washington, D.C. A little bit about this piece. Images for Brass is a piece that was premiered by the brass choir of the U.S. Marine Band at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. Set into 4 movements, short movements, it is a descriptive work that was composed to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Iwo Jima, which took place in 1945. The famous image of the raising of the flag on the top of Mount Suribachi signaled the end of this significant Pacific conflict of the Second World War. Movement 1, the prologue. The opening 2 minutes represent the anticipation before the conflict. You'll hear tubular bells, drones, the trombones with this ominous melody, later on joined by the rest of the brass. The music continues straight into the second movement, Approach by Sea. This depicts the arduous journey to the scene of the battle. The fluctuating cornets represent the sea, and the movement between time signatures lends an uneasy feeling that gives the atmosphere of being at sea. The chorale prayer, the music falls into an introspective moment, featuring the hymn tune Melita, or Eternal Father, Strong to Save. It leads into the final movement, which is the battle itself, engagement. Opening with a 2-note motif from the muted trumpets. The band follows, creating a cascade of sharp replies. Towards the end, the music signifies the raising of the American flag at the end of the battle, with the music echoing the national anthem. And it comes to a fiery close to this very highly programmatic work. So we'll do a tuning note, and we are honored to play Images for Brass. like to thank Dan Saylor for sitting in on half a rehearsal to play with us on that one. One of our percussionists could not be here tonight. Thanks, Dan. We had a concert about a week ago. We did frequently, if you hear concert bands play Percy Granger's Irish tune, it's often followed by Shepherd's Hay, which we did at our concert a week ago, but tonight you'll just get to hear Irish tune. Favorite song of mine, sang it to my girls when they were little, still sing it to them. So can't beat Danny Boy. And Doc would have loved it too. before we do our combined numbers, after this next number, I'll say a few more words about Doc. One of the things that he influenced me a lot as a musician and as a person. As you were talking about things, I had forgotten that he did his doctorate at UNC, and I did too, and it reminded me of a whole list of things in which we were similar and are similar, not the least of which is a bald head. But there are a lot of other things. And so one of the first things that I did upon getting my job at USD, I was the director of bands at USD for 25 years. But the first thing I did, your story about Doc getting the brass choir into the catalog, the first thing I did was start a brass choir at USD that met in the weekly schedule, just like Doc had done. And in my first few years, I had some pretty good groups, and one of my best players who I featured in my early brass choirs was Matt Erickson. So when we decided we would do this piece together, I thought, what things did we do with Matt? And so I thought, yes, the Hall of the Mountain King. This is Greek like you've never heard before. So please welcome to the stage, bass trombone, Mr. Matt Erickson. We'll do a brief set change here to include Augie's brass choir with our brass ensemble. I'll just say a couple more words about Doc Krieger. There are many of you in the audience I know, I see, and I know that you could say a lot of things about Doc Krieger as well, but this is not going to be an open mic night, sorry. We can visit afterwards. We're all going to the Barrel House after this if you want to come and visit some more. Doc was a nice guy. He was a very nice person, but he was also very serious about music. I'll never forget my first year at Augustana as a freshman. I got my grades at the end of the fall semester, and I had a B in trumpet lessons. And I had never gotten a B in trumpet before in high school or any other time. And I did ask him about it in a lesson. He said, "You got to practice harder." He said, "You're not practicing enough." And I thought, okay, so he's serious. But he also recognized a little bit of talent when he saw it, as evidenced by the fact that my freshman year, in the trumpet section of the brass choir, there were 4 freshmen, which means that there were some upperclassmen that were not in there, and they were not happy about it. And they took it out on we 4 freshmen, so we had to hold our own. I think when I think about Doc, I think of so many things. His network of people that he knew around the world really inspired me. Matt mentioned the European tours, but also the trip to New York for the New York Brass Conference, where Lou Soloff, the famous trumpet player, got soloed with our brass choir. And if you don't know Lou Soloff, he's the one who plays the trumpet solo on God Bless the Child, Blood, Sweat, and Tears on that album. That's Lou Soloff playing the trumpet solo on that. So things like that. He expected professionalism out of us. We played every year for Viking Varieties, and sometimes we would get those arrangements from Gene White or Mark Free at the last minute, like the week of the show. And I had to get all the music ready because my work study job was music librarian. So I had to get all the music together. It was all handwritten. You couldn't read it very well sometimes. But Doc expected us to be professional and read that on 1 or 2 rehearsals sometimes and be very good. And so that kind of expectation, along with his stern look sometimes, really made me serious. That stern look, however, often turned into a wry grin, a sly little grin and smile, because he knew deep down he cared about us as people as well, as musicians. Doc had a big influence on me. As I mentioned, I started the brass choir at USD. I took over for him as an all-state band judge, played trumpet in South Dakota Symphony as he did. I didn't know that the last 3 years at Augie, he was department chair. My last 3 years of teaching at Northern State, I was department chair. So Doc inspired me in many ways. It is really great to have this concert in honor of him. He was such a fabulous musician, a fabulous person, and he touched, I know, many lives out here. And you young students, you didn't get to know him, but I think you are experiencing at Augustana the same kinds of things that he led. And so we're happy to have you join us, and I'll quit talking. One of the composers that Doc loved was Gabrielli. We almost every year did some Gabrielli music, so we would like to do that for you now. One of my favorites, Canzone Septimi Toni No. 2.
While we reset for our last piece, a few thank yous are in order. First of all, a huge thank you to the Sioux Empire Brass and their conductor, Dr. Rolf Olson. How about a round of applause for them? Rolf also mentioned some friends helping us out. We have Dan Seiler on percussion. Dan, thanks for being here. Dan's one of our professors at Augustana. Also, Professor Mike Anderson on tuba is sneaking away over there on stage right. Thanks for joining us, Mike. And on organ on this last piece, we have Professor Matt Tyluki helping us. One of the things that I remember most about my early brass choir days was being able to play large brass with other groups. This is a really special treat for us as Augustana students to perform with this many brass players in the Sioux Falls community. I'm pretty sure the Sioux Empire Brass would welcome any new members. Is that right, you guys? Yeah. So students, you guys can follow on in Doc Krieger's footsteps going from Augustana Brass Choir to Sioux Empire Brass. To close this concert, we have nothing less than a trip to Rome, as the Sioux Empire Brass will be doing later this summer. They're going to Italy and Croatia, right? So we're going to take you all to Rome with us. This is Pines of Rome, Pines of the Appian Way by Oratorio Respighi. Thank you so much. Have a great evening, everyone. Take care.